Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Arete podcast. As you know, I'm Jake, and I'm joined today by Shawhain of the Goosebumps Crew podcast, and we're going to be just reminiscing about the greatest decade ever.
The 90s.
The 90s, dude. It was totally radical and tubular and all those things.
It's funny because I was actually just talking to somebody about the other day and they said up your button around the corner. And I was like, God damn, that's a 90s phrase. It's like I haven't heard that in so long.
It's like that and Psych.
Psych.
Was that before or after? Not. I think it was around the same.
When we get like the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, it's like the golden era in my life. Like phrases, shows, everything. Even commercials through the 90s were fantastic.
Yeah, and it was literally I touch on this all the time that I believe our generation is the luckiest generation that will have ever lived, at least in this millennium, because we remember because we were cognizant of what life was like before the internet. But we
Right.
also were not too old to not be able to appreciate the internet. We got to see it
Grow
spring, yeah,
rapidly.
and because of that technology, we have the ability to go back and easily find and access all the things that we loved when we were younger. And
Right.
a lot of it's getting rebooted. So,
Yeah, I mean, well, nostalgia sells, and now we're to the point where the 90s are nostalgic. That's really sad to think about, and it makes me feel super old. But it's
yeah.
true. When you think about everything from uh, even the X-Men animated series in the 90s is now getting I want to say, sequel series, not a reboot, because it's taking place still, they're calling it X-Men 97. So it's still in the 90s for those characters.
Yeah, I was
So
curious. I was curious about that because it sounded like they were rebooting it, but you're telling me it's a continuation?
that's what I'm understanding. The way they make it seem is it's going to be a continuation, not a reboot.
I
Whether
mean,
that's true or not, I don't know. But from everything I've gathered from the show so far, it looks like it's more of a sequel.
I'll take it. That's
Yeah.
almost better in my opinion because I mean the series in and of itself is awesome enough. You don't really need to redo it. But I like the idea of a continuation, especially it's going to be in the same style. Like probably the animation is going to be smoother, but hopefully it's in the same style, character designs, all that good stuff.
Oh yeah, they actually have wave one of the figures out right now,
Oh,
and they look exactly like they did in the '90s show. Wolverine, Gambit. They threw in a few surprise ones for wave two. The Goblin Queen, I think, was one of them, which was interesting. Like, not if you're not too familiar with it. I mean, I'm even not too familiar with Goblin Queen as much. I'm more of a DC guy, so a lot of the Marvel stuff, like I know a chunk, but a lot of it still can elude me. But that's me growing up on DC, though.
yeah, I'm more of a DC guy generally speaking. Even though when I was younger, I was a Marvel kid, but probably when I was super young, I didn't really. I understood that they were different comic books, but I probably didn't understand the hard distinction because when we were really young, you had I don't what network was Batman the Animated Series on? That was on Fox Kids, was it not?
So yeah, it was in part with Fox Kids, which is at the time not too out of the normal because like those were the Saturday morning cartoons. Because I don't think we really had like, um, well, they had like WB4 here locally and stuff like that. But I mean, most of that stuff was on Fox Kids, Power Rangers, Goosebumps, uh,
The big
X Men,
yeah.
like all the real big shows were Fox Kids.
Well, yeah, because and that's where some of the confusion might have come from. Because when I was really young, you had Batman the animated series and X Men and Spider Man, and they were on the same channel. So,
Right.
in my small child mind, there was no reason to think that they were vastly like they weren't in a rivalry of comic book companies.
Right. Well, that was the magic of the television shows back in the day. They didn't care what network they were on. They didn't have to have streaming services dedicated specifically to DC, Marvel. Like they could intermingle. I mean, Netflix is kind of doing that now because I noticed they started getting some DC stuff and I think some Marvel stuff still, but I think Marvel's now pretty much cornered all the market on their stuff, and it's pretty much all been just on Disney Plus.
Yeah, DC has for the most part too, with the bulk of their stuff being on Max. But yeah, licensing's a bitch. Um,
Yeah.
believe it or not, it used to be easier in the age of television because a network would just license property and then it owned the distribution rights to it or whatever that agreement was. Streaming made things super
Oh
complicated.
yeah. It made it so complicated. I mean, even now. I mean, did you ever watch those uh, like the toys that made us, the movies that made us on Netflix?
I love the
Okay,
toys
so
that made us.
so you've seen like how easy it was back in the day. It's like, oh, these Transformers, for instance. Like, oh, okay, saw this on a network in Japan. That's really cool. Let's make it into a show here in America. Boom, blew up. It was just that easy. Like, granted they had some obstacles back in the day. Nothing goes that smoothly. I mean, even Power Rangers had its
I
difficulties getting made.
God, I love the story of Power Rangers. That was literally that it was such a time. Haim Saban literally, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but Haim Saban essentially bought the rights on a chance, and then in order to get Fox to put a show on the air, they were like, "Cool, but you have to produce what was it? Theme song? No, that's what he did before. What did he have to produce in order to get Power Rangers on the air? I can't remember.
So if I remember right, and I could be wrong too, I mean, audience, feel free to adjust my quotes here. But so if I remember right, like the whole thing was he was in Japan, saw the show Super Sentai on television. She's like, oh, I want to do something with this. Try to get it sold to America, but see the problem was like the Japanese show and their rating system is way different, obviously, than here. So it ended up being more or less issues with the fact that Rita Repulsa was selling her soul to the devil and trying to kill children, and they're like, "Whoa!" It's like we can't do none of that here. And so a lot of these like executives at these companies were just like, "No, we don't want to touch that. We don't think this is going to be big here." And it was like one lady at I think it was Fox who was like taking a chance on it, and if it failed, like it was her job, like, but she had faith in that, and that's ended up being how we ended up getting Power Rangers. Like, so it's kind of neat. It's like the whole thing was like you got to do it on a budget. Here's your shoestring budget, and that's again why we get cutscenes from why American actors to Japanese footage.
Yeah, I don't think people quite realize how much cheaper that was and how much money they saved by doing it that way, which is why he did it.
Oh yeah,
Because it was a good concept and it was like, hey, we can do this for nothing. Like, because we already have the bulk of the action footage, which is the hardest to shoot. Now, they did, as the show got popular, as you obviously are aware, but anybody who watched it, they started doing more action set pieces with the American actors as the series progressed. Because, God, I mean, we talked about this on the Average Intelligence podcast. Talk about something that just exploded overnight.
yeah, literally overnight. I mean, the moment it aired, like it just they couldn't have predicted how big that show would have got. I
No
couldn't
one,
have either, to be honest. Like, who could?
yeah. Well, and what's crazy is I remember vaguely, mind you, because I was 5 years old. But I remember watching the premiere and it being completely unlike anything I had ever seen before. And I was immediate. I remember the following Monday because it premiered on Saturday. And I remember the following Monday, everyone was talking about Power Rangers and everybody wanted to be the Red Ranger.
Oh yeah, till the
That,
green came along, and then it was like, ugh, like
there was
the red who?
there was a fuck Jason.
Which is funny because I mean, like, you had a few people that obviously wanted to be Billy or Zach, but the majority was Jason, which makes sense because they used, obviously in the Sentai show, dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are obviously very popular with children. Tyrannosaurus Rex, one of if not the most popular dinosaur, probably in history. So now he's the Red Ranger. He's the leader. He's a Tyrannosaurus Rex. That's what his dinosaur is.
He has
I
the
mean,
sword.
yeah, it was just a gold mine of like, I just couldn't believe like nobody thought of this before Haim Spawn was like, oh yeah, this looks really cool. Kids would love this.
I
Been going
can't even.
on like years in Japan. I can't remember how many years in Japan have been going at this point.
Oh God, that had to. Well, I
Uh,
mean,
I think it started in the mid to late '80s,
oh, I would think
maybe
before
sooner.
that. It depends on if you count Common Rider as Super Sentai, which maybe
Um,
not, but he's
I don't know.
certain that definitely
I think so.
led to it. I wouldn't because it wasn't a team; it was a single character. But
Right.
I would say if you
I'm,
include that, geez, that goes back well into the 70s.
I have to look. I want to say the first Sentai show was actually Go Under. I could be wrong about that though. Like, I don't know a whole lot about the Sentai stuff. I've watched a few seasons, but I haven't watched them all. So their history is not totally known to me like Mighty Morphin is. But
Yeah,
that's the part of the '90s that was great, though. I mean, you had all those toys, you had all these great shows. Uh, like I said, the restaurants even in the '90s were a lot better. I mean, they were more inviting than they are today.
oh,
It's
dude,
like
could
literally the
you?
restaurants now today look like angry old men wanting to get their people off their lawn. You know what I mean? Like that's how restaurants look nowadays inside.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, could you imagine going into a Pizza Hut and eating pizza today?
I went in to pick one up one time and I was like, God, this is depressing.
Yeah, I know,
Like, I'm
but
glad I'm not sitting in here.
but
So,
geez, you remember in the '90s? I mean, and it was everywhere. Like I can't remember other than a sit down restaurant, mind you. Like I can't remember the last time I willingly went in somewhere like to a fast food or a pizza joint, sat down and ate in the place, and was like, "Yeah, this is awesome."
yeah. I mean, now there's one locally here that I like to go to, but it's also like a brewery winery. So, but they have great brick oven pizza. It's phenomenal. And then they got some cornhole and stuff outside. So it's more generated towards, teenager to adult audiences. But when you look at Taco Bell back in the day in the '90s, McDonald's in the '90s, Pizza Hut in the '90s, all these places you love to go to, especially like Pizza Hut because they had arcade games in there, the buffet. The pizza back then was good. Now it's kind of shite, but that's here nor there. Personal preference on that. But still, I mean, it's like everything back in the '90s. When you go look at pictures of how they looked inside, incredible. I'd go there right now. But
Oh, I think if I think that could make a I think that could make a ton of money if you open that style of restaurant. Like you know how they did the Cafe '80s and Back to the Future Part
yeah,
Two. If they made a Cafe '90s, I do believe that it would be a moneymaker.
oh, 100%. And if I had the capital to, actually start up that kind of business, I'd be all over it.
Dude, it'd be a no
I mean,
brainer. Like if nothing else, you just get a bunch of dudes in their 30s and 40s.
I'm telling you, like if you can do it to where you can make it look like an old style restaurant, like from the '90s. I hate saying old style and '90s together because it doesn't seem like that long ago, but damn, it was forever ago. So, but if you can do something like that, like even if you portion off different sections to make it look like an old part of a restaurant, like this section over here look like an old McDonald's, this section over here looks like an old Taco Bell, this section looks like an old Pizza Hut. You put some arcade games in from the time, like Rampage or Primal Rage was a good one I used to like in the '90s.
I
Stuff like that.
just rediscovered Primal Rage the other day, and God, it shouldn't be as fun as it is,
But it
but
is
it is just mindless fun. Remember when video games were just brainless fun?
kinda because I want to say like back in the day we didn't think of them that way, but they really were.
Boy, I can remember when Ocarina of Time came out, and we were all around the screen like, "This is so lifelike."
I feel that's average. It's like WrestleMania 2000. It's like, God, how can this get any more realistic? There's no way. And now we're like, good God.
Yeah, now we're criticizing movies for their CGI.
Oh, I know it. That bothers me to no end. Like, don't get me wrong, like CGI, because how far it's advanced, movies shouldn't have that kind of problem. But the problem that I've been hearing anyway, whether it's true or not, is the fact that one, the budgets, aren't quite as big as they used to be for that. Because technology obviously has grown so much. That's why you see like TVs being cheaper than they normally are. Like you can get like a 70-inch TV now for like $400, and back in the day it might have been like 2 grand. Things like that. I mean, so technology's gotten cheaper. So the technology's there. It's just the time is not there. They're really crunching to get these movies out, and at least that's what I'm hearing. And they're just like short strawing the CGI off.
So I've basically been told by, well, I haven't been told. I've heard from VFX artists in various places and articles and on YouTube. The problem is essentially that let's say Disney, or I'll shit on the Flash for a second. So let's say Warner Brothers has a movie that they need CGI work done for. They go to a VFX house and say, "Hey, we have X amount of scenes." Now they don't tell the house what's involved in those scenes. They just have a number and say, okay, what are you going to charge us to do this? Because we're taking bids. And since these are all, and I'm not a big union guy, but it's a non-union industry, so everybody's just trying to underbid each other because they need the work to,
Right.
save that. So then after they win the bid, then they get the shot lists and they're like, oh Christ, you want us to animate a guy who can move fast as the speed of light in a crumbling building, catching 11 babies, putting one in a microwave, like, and we're charging you how much? Like, and the studios are doing it on purpose. And then whenever they criticize it, everybody's like, oh, well, those VFX sucks. Well, everybody blames the production house because they don't know how it's done. And then that negatively affects the production house because then people are like, oh, let's say, I don't know the name of a production house off the top of my head, which is another problem. But, it's like, say, oh, Studio B, they really shit the bed with the Flash. Let's never use them again.
You can go that route and kind of have that problem. Now, granted, this is a far cry, but this was a comparison I saw online, which made a lot of sense. So I don't know if you've seen the new Godzilla movie. Phenomenal movie.
It's so good.
Like my favorite has always been the '89 Return of Godzilla movie.
That's a really good one, and it was funny. That's one that I did not like when I was a kid, and then I watched it again as an adult, and I'm like, this is a goddamn masterpiece.
Oh, I loved it as a kid. I think it was mostly just because of Godzilla's design at the time.
Yeah, I
Um,
always I sort of, well, I didn't joke. I made a prediction. My favorite to this day, well, not to this day, sorry. My favorite up to seeing the newest one was the original because it's everything Godzilla. But I said I predict that my favorite will be -1 after seeing it, and yeah, I was totally right. -1 is amazing.
yeah, and that's the thing. Like, it's right up there for me. Like, it's hard for me to pick one now because I absolutely loved -1. It was one of the only few films I will say of all of Godzilla. So I can actually sit there and say I wasn't just waiting for Godzilla to come back on the screen the whole time. I was just like, come on, I want more monster destruction or I want monster fights. The story, the acting, that was all phenomenal. That was great. It was
I
so good.
I was shocked because one of the biggest criticisms with the Godzilla franchise is you never care about the human characters, and that's
Mhm.
that's true of the American dubs. If you watch the Japanese versions, you do tend to get more invested because they just edit it better. But definitely of the English dubs, you don't care about the human characters because they cut scenes, they change dialogue around, blah blah blah. But and actually, Justin Spur of the Spur of the Moment podcast said it perfectly. He said it's the only time I've seen a Godzilla movie where I wanted them to fuck Godzilla up. Like I wanted Godzilla to lose because I wanted
And
these people to be
that's fair.
okay.
And that's fair. They actually made you care about the characters in the movie. But what I was saying before was so the comparison that I saw online was the Flash, and this is what made me think of it. Their CGI budget of like bajillion dollars to Godzilla -1, that its budget was like nothing. Basic. I mean, granted, now it's a lot of money to us common folk. Of I think it was like 12 to 15 million
50,
dollars.
15 million, yeah, which is,
Um,
I mean,
so it's just
there
enough maybe to make it good, and in this case, like way beyond that. But it just shows you like what they can do with CGI on a smaller budget if you just can actually take the time to put in the work. But that's kind of the problem too, is like a lot of these companies, like you said, they get the bids, they get the job, and it's like, okay, we just wrapped filming. Now you've got 6 months to do all this. It's like,
well,
oh, but we've got like 20 billion shots of CGI to throw in here, especially something like the Flash. Um, so it's like, oh, god damn. It's like, okay, well, can we do this? Now I don't know what Godzilla minus one's time frame was to finish any of that, but they definitely probably didn't have the same kind of budget, obviously, and time frame that a movie like The Flash would have got. And The Flash had a problem too, of any ways, of like a lot of those reshoots and stuff, because the unfortunate side effect of the DCEU dying, which is unfortunate because after we saw Zack Snyder's Justice League and how masterful that was, and seeing Darkseid, you're like, God, I want more, and it's not coming now. But somehow we ended up getting two Aquaman movies, two Shazam movies, Blue Beetle, not a single Batman film though with Affleck, but whatever. I could go on a tangent for that forever.
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast. But
that's a whole other thing outside the '90s. But
yeah,
that's where the '90s actually came in, because you even got better toys in kids meals. Like I remember when Batman Returns came out in '92.
mm-hmm.
I think it was '92.
Yeah,
But
'92 because
I remember the
first one was
bags, the
'89.
promotional cups, the lids that were frisbees, and
I
I
just
still have
saw.
some of those things. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah,
where's
I
all that
just.
shit today?
Oh
Like,
God, they never would. I just saw the other day. I think it was Burger King that had them, but when Batman and Robin came out, they had those freeze mugs that you could get.
yeah, the
So
glass
those,
mugs. Like I still have those.
yeah, those are cool and practical.
Yeah, I mean, I never used mine honestly. Like even at that age, I was like, no, I'm gonna keep them as display pieces, because they were like so well like detailed. They weren't just like smooth glass. They were very textured, like three-dimensionally textured all the way around the cup.
Yeah,
So, I mean, they were worth the money. And now I don't know what they go for. I don't really care. I'm never selling mine, but it's just the fact that that's the kind of cool shit we got back in the '90s, even the '80s. But now
yeah. Now it's
I feel like
I
we're
don't
back
even
to
I don't even know why you would get a kids meal, right? But do you remember? And this was Burger King because I remember it being so random when Burger King was giving the they weren't actually gold, obviously, but they were like the gold cast Dragon Ball figures with their kids meals.
yes,
Like, where did this come from?
yeah. It was very odd. But they had a lot of really strange things with Burger King, because then they also had that like what do they call it, the Burger King Kids Club meal. So you were a big kid. That's why those toys were meant for big kids. You had Dragon Ball, even Pokemon had a thing there, and I still have at least two of them, but I could only find one. It was large Pokeballs that when you open it up, it had like a 24-karat gold plated or fake gold plated, like Pokemon card inside and stuff displayed. I mean, I still have my Charizard one. They're probably not worth jack today, but
I don't
I
know. That might actually be worth something. And oh my god, speaking of being worth nothing today. Well, not all of them, but you remember Beanie Babies?
oh yeah,
God,
yeah,
that's
that's a few.
90s.
Because even McDonald's did kids meals of those too. So, and then the Power Rangers movie, they had a whole promotion for that. I mean, this is what the '90s were, though. I mean, like it was. So it's advertising to like the 10th degree in the '90s. Like you still get advertising today for stuff, but it's nowhere. It's like nowhere near as memorable
No,
as it
not
was.
even close. Well, it also, like you said, it's not as good because, like, I remember a lot of those toys, like for a free thing that, well, it's not free, but for something that just comes with a kids meal at a fast food joint, they're pretty good.
Oh yeah, they were phenomenal back then. I mean, like they actually put some type of quality into them, whereas the stuff now, like wow, like I don't know. Did you get any of those boo buckets? Like that was another thing. Like
Oh,
growing up, we all got from '80s, '90s. So they've done boo buckets the last couple years.
I saw that. Yeah, I was glad they brought those back because they're, God, that took me back.
I mean, I was happy at first until I saw the design, and I was like, wow. So like I have the old ones still, thank God, because these new ones are terrible. But they don't have lids anymore. Like they cheaped out on putting lids on. Instead, the handle is a thin piece of plastic that has a cookie cutter looking thing on it of the shape design of the lids back in the day. So it's like a cheaped out version of the handles, or the I should not the handles, but the lids. And now instead of like one like face to be centered on in the bucket, they put like three faces on the bucket. So when you turn it, there's another face, which is a neat idea until they don't line up with the handle. So it's like, oh, all right.
Not a
So it
lot of
looks
not a lot of
wonky.
forethought put into that.
No, and they've done that 2 years in a row now. So I don't know. Like it's just like they tried to bring the nostalgia back for us who remember these things and how great they were, but they just cheap out on it.
Well, what kills me is like all you have to do is just do it again.
Yeah,
Like surely the McDonald's Corporation still has the molds and the artwork somewhere, and if they don't have it, it can easily be reproduced. You're just copying it. It's yours anyway. Who cares?
right.
Like why
Oh, they
does
have to for
yeah,
sure.
they have to. They have to.
Because
But
even like toy companies like who is it, Mattel
mm,
or Hasbro, whoever does Ninja Turtles, I can't remember. So they have brought back like the original toys in original packaging, even how they were back then on like the plastic tree that you got to tear off the weapons and stuff like that. I mean, literally look exactly how they did back in the day that you can purchase right now in the store.
oh yeah, because they still have the molds and I
Exactly.
it was
Still have the
originally
molds, packaging design, all that stuff because it was patented and everything was, stored away, filed away. It's not hard to bring it back.
yeah, well, I
And
know
Transformers started doing it too, I think, with some stuff.
yeah, Playmates was the original company, but I think they're no longer a thing. So I'm not sure who bought them, but yeah, when they bought it, they would have gotten all that stuff. So yeah, it's easy. I do want to give you a chance to talk about your podcast. So that's actually a decent transition with the boo buckets. But what would the '90s have been without the Scholastic Book Fair, specifically the Goosebumps books?
Oh, it's hard to say because now, like even as adults, there's actually a really cool thing I saw, and I just saw it's a Scare Elastic fair that a brewery is putting on here in Indiana, I think it was. So like it's obviously touched generations because I even when my daughter was in elementary school, I went to hers, and immediately it just threw me back. You know what I mean? Like it's like God dang, it's like where's my $20 to get that Lamborghini poster and those Goosebumps books and those pencil grips and stuff like that. That we'd spend money on for no reason whatsoever. It was just
But
because it was cool. It's like
well, it was also dirt cheap, which is why it's a beautiful thing because, oh my gosh, the focus. I mean, Scholastic made money, but the focus was to get kids to read.
yeah,
And it worked.
yeah. It was to this day they still do them obviously, but without it. I mean, I don't know where it would be. I mean, now granted, Goosebumps in general got popular because of the show that happened in '95. Goosebumps books have been out for a couple years at that point, at least, maybe even three. Uh, but it wasn't until the '95 TV series that really blew up the entire Goosebumps line. Then books started selling like crazy, and then they started making merchandise for everything. I mean, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing Goosebumps merchandise on a shelf. I mean, that was the craziest thing. It was like Power Rangers. Like, couldn't go anywhere without seeing Power Rangers on the shelf when it wasn't sold out.
Yeah,
That was cool too.
I don't think we would see that with books. I don't think we'd see that again until Harry Potter, but even then it wasn't the same level of merchandising. Like you'd see the books everywhere when they first came out, but the merchandising came way later after the movie. So I guess it's kind of similar. But question for you: so the dummy behind you is Slappy from the '95 series, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, because I know it's a different design, and I'm sure it's a different story actually. Or is Mr. Wood in the '95 series?
So, actually, we discussed a little bit of Mr. Wood in our last episode when we spoke with Tim Jacobus, and because was curious if he was ever given that indication to put Mr. Wood on the cover of Night of the Living Dummy, or if it's always been Slappy. So, Mr. Wood, for those who don't know about Goosebumps, yes, he was in the books, but he never made it to the show. So the very first episode of Night of the Living Dummy was actually not the first book that was done, but it was the second one. So Night of the Living Dummy 2. There's a lot of like rumors saying that that episode was filmed but never aired. The first one, the Night of the Living Dummy, because it was too scary for kids. Whether or not that's true, we don't know. Like, I would love to talk to someone at Fox or Scholastic or whoever just to confirm if this was real. Like, if this episode's out there and they have it locked away, I'm gonna start that hashtag release the Night of the Living Dummy, like they did with Restore the Snyderverse and all that stuff. Like, I'm starting a movement to get that freaking episode out there because I want to see it. But it's
Yeah.
always been Slappy. Now, I will say the one thing they did different in the show was Slappy's design that you see behind me is not actually how he's described in the books. So he had dark hair and blue eyes in the book. Slappy in the show ends up being a ginger with, some scenes it looks like he's got brown eyes, and it looks like they do change him over time, and he's got more green eyes. So it's kind of weird that they changed the design, and I don't know how that transition happened, like where they got that change from. But
There's a lot of things that happened and will happen in television that just doesn't make any sense. But for better or worse, that's what was in the show. But yeah, you touched on something I did want to let people know. So you guys recently, actually your previous episode, did an interview with Tim Jacobus, the artist who did not all the covers of the original line, but the bulk of them, correct?
correct. So like he did Welcome to Dead House, which is the very first book, but he didn't do Stay Out of the Basement. That was still at a time where they were trying to decide between him and the other artists that they had in kind of competition with each other, and seeing which people liked more, which art style people liked more. In the end, Tim won because of his use of the colors and things like that. Is the way it's kind of described. So most of the rest of the books were all him. I think there might be one other I might be blanking on right now that he didn't do, but he did almost all the original 62. He did Series 2000, most of that, and then he did a couple of the Give Yourselves, if I remember right, special editions and stuff. But at the time, like that's when Goosebumps kind of started to trail off a little bit as far as popularity goes, because then Harry Potter came in '99, I think it was.
97. Yeah, everything happened so fast. It seems
So
like it should have been more time. But no, because the first
right,
Harry Potter book got released in 1997.
but it was the movie. When did the first movie come out? Was
Oh,
it
the
'99 or 2000?
I think the first movie came out in 2001.
2001. Okay, I don't know why I think '99
Could
then, but
could be wrong, but I think
it,
it was
it
2001.
it was all in that same like general 10, 15 years of each other though. You know what I mean? So it's like we had so much cool stuff happening, and honestly, that's what ended up kind of killing off the Goosebumps craze was Harry Potter. Which, to a fair point, Harry Potter's pretty awesome. So I mean, it's like I'm happy with both. Now, granted, obviously, my love of Goosebumps is way more than Harry Potter, but that doesn't deter the fact that I really enjoy Harry Potter. So, and Goosebumps hasn't went anywhere. Like that's the other thing too. Like getting to talk with Stein at an event in Green Bay, the guy still at 80 years old writes for I think he said he's like writes like 2 hours a day. There's a block of time every day that he writes, and it doesn't matter where he's at. As soon as he hits 2,000 words, he's done. He stops, which is interesting because like if you're on like a great, oh man, this is really good stuff. You're writing, you're just going at it. But here's your 2,000 words. He's just stops. He says he's done. He's
Hmm.
like everybody would kill to have my schedule. He's like I only work for 2 hours a day, and I'm like, yeah, no, I'd kill to have that too.
Yeah, that would be pretty awesome. Although I was happy to read that because in the podcast episode you do with Tim Jacobus, he dropped a factoid that I certainly didn't know, and the fact that the cover for it's Chicken, right?
Yeah,
The cover for that, the original cover was actually accidentally reversed, but they
reversed. Yeah,
but they fixed it in the 2007 reprint.
yeah, yeah. The way he described it was, and I can't remember the exact name of it, but basically it's a clear shot of his art, uh, and it's supposed to be like where they put it up. It's supposed to obviously be flipped, but the person didn't do it. So his signature on that original cover and the whole thing is just backwards. So there was a lot of interesting things we found out about that series run that he did.
It is a killer episode. Link is in the description, by the way. You can check out the Goosebumps Crew podcast. As someone who was not a Goosebumps super fan, I was a little surprised how into it I got, just because you guys are all. I think it's safe to say you guys are all super fans and you know what you're talking about. But then you even get to talk with Tim Jacobus, because this is not something. I mean, Goosebumps was around before the internet, so there's still a lot of information that may not necessarily be common knowledge. Not like if it had come out today and all that stuff would have been well documented and all that good stuff. So it was fun to still learn some things. And I know there were a couple things where all of you learned that from the first time, but you were hearing it from straight from the horse's mouth. So that was a lot of fun to listen to.
Yeah, the whole concept, like when Series 2000 started, like I didn't know that he had to paint one entire giant portrait instead of one that he does for those covers, because it was a two-part book, and the covers, when they put together, make one picture. So the whole story of him telling me, or telling us, that when he shipped that off and he gets a notification of it's like been bent in half, and he was flipping out, because then obviously he has a time crunch that he has, like, to get these arts done, and then he's got to start another one, because Stein was writing so fast and these books were being published so fast that he had a limited amount of time to get those covers in. And the fact that he was only given like the book title and a few sentences about the book and the monster in it, that's it, and then he just had freedom to do whatever else he wanted, shows you kind of talent that he actually had. Because I mean, if I told you the book title is I Stepped in Gum, but the monster is a giant, pterodactyl, I don't even know. Just say something random. Well, how are you going to make that connect on a book cover? Well, it's kind of like where he got the idea of, like, it came from beneath the sink. What do I do with that? And I just kind of laughed, because I was like, yeah, no, I feel that. I was like, I'm not even like a pro artist. Like, I do art, but I'm not a pro artist like he is. So trying to think about how do you make a cover scary about a title of a book and a sponge, and the whole thing is called "It Came from Beneath the Sink." It's like, but he did. It's a
I,
great cover.
I was going to say, and yet he did it. And we're not going to give you any more stuff. You have to go listen to that podcast if you want more. But I will say the entire thing is chock full of just great stories like that. And I learned a lot. And we're going to take this moment to segue a little bit to our sponsor. This podcast is brought to you today by the Part of Your Broadway World podcast. And as soon as you're done watching this one, there's a link in the description where you can go check out Haley's podcast, again, Part of Your Broadway World. And the most recent episode features yours truly, where we have a good old time talking about the various incarnations of A Christmas Carol. And also, obviously, part of the Arete podcast network, along with the Goosebumps crew. You have no idea how happy I was when you guys agreed to, become part of the network, because I knew you guys were going to have a great podcast. And Haley, too, very, very talented. All of you, much more so than me. So I hope to ride your coattails to success.
Well, I'm really excited for us going forward, because Tim's easily was the biggest guest announcement we could have had, and just at the third episode in to starting this podcast together. But now I will say we have a good group of guys. So we have Goosebumps Aussie fan, as many YouTubers know, and anybody in the Goosebumps, community knows, just because he's literally been the torch runner for Goosebumps for the last probably 15, 20 years on YouTube, if I had to guess. Um, then we've got Steam Lord, who, his channel, Goosebumps channels, where we put those podcasts at, but also he puts a variety of other stuff, including the original airings. So you
Which,
still get those commercials.
yeah, which I was gonna bring that up,
So
because I
nice.
only I only recently discovered those were on his channel, and I'm like, oh, this is so cool and weird at the same time.
Those commercials, man. Like, I watched The Haunted Mask. It's my favorite episode. But I forgot about that Duracell commercial and the Duracell family. You remember that?
Oh my
Like,
god.
they look so scary, like almost like blocky looking, like they're from a Cartoon Network cartoon or something. And they're all got these giant batteries in their back, and that's when they open the door and Grandma's in there like getting down. and it's because she's got a Duracell battery now. She's going crazy. So it's like, wow, it's
Oh
like
my
this is the
god.
stuff of nightmares.
Do you remember Pizza Head?
Yes, and that's what I was gonna bring up too. Like that's what I'm saying. Like the '90s commercials, man, were so good. Like,
Yeah. Well, they had their own characters because I know the Noid was a product of the '80s, but I guess they brought him back.
I mean, I remember Avoid the Noid.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
mean, we saw it, but I mean,
that was primarily '80s, I think. But I mean, he lasted through part of the '90s at
yeah.
least.
Did you know he had his own NES game?
I think I do actually. That sounds familiar.
Now, this is
I
how
think I remember
crazy.
seeing it in like a where was that? Not a flea market, but I think I saw it in a pawn shop. I think that's where I saw it at, like
Yeah.
many, 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 many years ago.
Well, that's how crazy of a decade the '90s were because you had a spokesperson for, I'd probably go out on a limb and say the number 3 or 4 pizza company in the United States and their mascot, and he gets a Nintendo game? Like, who greenlit that?
Yeah. But then again, you got to think like how many games are out there that nobody's heard of today, unless you're like literally an avid gamer, because they didn't really get sequels or they didn't get whatever going forward as the consoles grew and got more expensive. You know, Obviously making games got more expensive too as time went on. So you're not going to have, annoyed video game anymore.
No, not
So
anymore. Isn't it crazy how there are, and this isn't a new phenomenon, this has been the case for probably about the last decade or so, where now you have video game releases that have the same budget as major Hollywood studio films.
yeah, I mean it's wild, but when you think about the engines they use and the voice actors and the story writers and everything like that, they are theatrical in a way.
Oh geez, just the fact that now video game cutscenes talk to you and you don't have to read everything.
Right. So I mean, because I remember, um, obviously when PlayStation came out, and that was a huge achievement, in everybody's mind, and it was. I mean, you even had games that were so long and so in depth and so much work into them. They were like 4 discs. I mean, it's wild when you think about that now that we can fit all of it onto one, and the graphics are better and everything like that. But I mean, look at Final Fantasy VII. Like that's still a massive collector's, or gamer's dream. Like it still holds up in my opinion to this day.
They,
You don't have to even get the remastered version.
I was going to say they did remaster it, correct? I thought they
Yeah,
did.
I mean that's funny too because like it's kind of like one of those going back to the Snyderverse stuff. It's like the Snyder cut was something everybody wanted to release, and then it was getting denied forever by Warner. Oh no, that doesn't exist. That's not real. You guys are crazy. I'll come to find out, no, it is real. And then they let Snyder finish it. Snyder even added some stuff in to make it even better, which is great. But same thing I heard with Final Fantasy VII was like the remastered version was real. Square Enix was like, no, 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 it's not. No, no, denying, deny, 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 plead the fifth. And then all of a sudden, here it is. It's like, we fucking knew it. It's like, I think they were just saving it until they actually needed cash because they knew they could get the money from it, which is smart, I guess, to have that in your back pocket in case, your company's hitting a low spot. Bring it out so you can get some of that made up financial. But still, I mean, it did come out. So, I mean, I have never played it. I only played the original. But
Yeah, I had a feeling there's a lot of people that would still prefer. I don't know. There is just something, and call it nostalgia, which is probably what it is. But there's something about playing the original, even if it's not quite as pretty. Um, you remember, you have your memories attached to that, which is why you can still play old. I mean, even old NES and Atari games, and like, I'm sorry, the original Pac-Man's better than any of the 3D stuff that came out with, even though it's way prettier, but you just can't beat the original.
no, well, everybody knows Pac-Man, and the first thing most people will think about is that original gameplay design, that 2D design of just a yellow blob going around eating dots. So we don't need 3D. We don't need a lot of that for some of these games. Even Donkey Kong, like as much as I love like where they took Donkey Kong later, he wasn't just a gorilla on top of a skyscraper throwing down barrels at Mario. They actually took that character and made brand new like storylines with him, new games with him. He's in all the crossover stuff for the most part. Obviously he was in this Mario Brothers movie, which was I think Seth Rogen voiced him. I
Yep.
think, if I remember right. Yeah. So I mean, obviously, these characters that were meant probably to only have that one life back in the day clearly ended up getting a new one as time went on. But you forget about some of the ones until you start, looking back on some of them, like Cubert and things like that. It's like they're kind of stuck back there. They tried, I think, doing new mastered games of them later, but 80s, 90s, it's like My Pet Monster. Like I don't know if you ever watched that. So
Long time ago.
I like the cartoon. I think that is actually on Prime or something. But there was also a live action movie that was done, and I loved that as a kid. But it never made it past VHS. So you can watch it on YouTube, I'm sure. But it's just kind of things like that, like things that you go back on, things that you can reminisce about, Dino Riders and Street Sharks and all these great stuff that happened that just really never carried past the 90s.
All those Ninja Turtle ripoffs. No, man, I mean, you can find everything on YouTube now, but I watched, or I started to watch, the first episode of Street Sharks not that long ago, and wow, we let a lot go when we were kids.
Yeah, we did.
Holy shit, because that was rough. That was rough to
Well,
watch.
even the original Ninja Turtles show, like I bought the whole collected set, right? And it came in a turtle van, looked cool. Man, I watched that first season, which was only like 4 or 5 episodes because they didn't really know where it was going to go. Wow, that was that was awful. That was
Really,
so.
I remember the first 6 episodes actually being, because they actually put some money into that. Now after that, they started cheaping out. I could be wrong though. It's been a minute.
I don't know. That's a personal preference. Like some stuff doesn't hold up over time. It's not as good as we remember it being.
Ain't that the
Even
truth?
going all the way back to the first Austin Powers movie. Like, I absolutely loved it back in the day when it first came out, and I quote it and this, that, and the other with friends and family from time to time. Man, I went back and watched it a few years ago, and I was like, holy cow, these jokes do not stand up to the test of time. It was pretty rough. But that's, again, kind of the nostalgia goggles or glow that you kind of get from things of the past. When you think about things rather than trying to bring them into current time, some things just don't hold up. Even some people, like I think you said you went back and watched the first episode of the Goosebumps '90s show, The Haunted Mask.
Well, you know what's funny, because I messaged you on Instagram after, because I started rewatching Goosebumps, and what did I say? Holy Canada!
You said, "Holy Canada!"
Because like, wow, I just did not notice it, but now in my 30s watching it, I'm like, oh my god, eh? Like,
Yeah, and that's
all
what I'm
the
saying. Like, so much stuff we just were oblivious to because of our age at the time. We just loved it for what it was. But if you watch it now as an adult, you can catch some things. Like I absolutely love all of the Goosebumps series. I mean, there were episodes that were very bad, mind you, but think about even stuff like Rocco's Modern Life. So, absolutely love that show. But how many sexual innuendos were in that show? Holy crap! Like
well, it was the whole
Rocco
thing,
had his
right?
own sex line. You know what I mean? Like he was calling Mrs. Bighead, oh baby," and it's like as a kid you don't get that. The restaurant was called Choky Chicken. Okay, as a kid, you're like, hey, Choky Chicken. But then you also get things like Kablam, if you remember
Whoa,
that.
I loved
Uh,
Kablam, specifically Action League Now,
and
but
that's where I was going with this. I mean, you had Action League Now, starring the
out,
Flash.
ouchies,
He's super strong and super
they're
naked.
naked. How did that show
Get
get
by with
made?
that today. No way you get by with that today.
I mean, I mean, you probably could, but Yeah, no, you're right. There'd be one person being like, "Oh, I don't know if we should do this." It's like it's not like he has a penis. Like it's
Right.
it's an action figure.
But they're exposing children to this. And
It's
then the stuff we're
disgusting.
exposing to today is also like, I love the connection between like when people said that "Baby It's Cold Outside" is, you know, a rapey song, and yet, okay, well here's, Nicki Minaj with WAP, so it's like, okay, we're gonna get "Baby It's Cold Outside" out of here, but let's get, you know let's get this wet ass pussy over here, whatever.
Yeah.
I got nothing about how they determine back in the day now is wrong, and how these things today, which are worse,
Hey
are
man,
better.
I say we meet in the middle. Let's release cold ass pussy.
So, oh, ooh, no, 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 cold fish, no, no. But again, that's the power of past, is that, looking on everything now, what we thought was okay, and now people looking at stuff and they're like, well, that probably wasn't as okay, and it's much like, I heard, and I don't know if this is true. This could be a tie-in for your other podcast, I guess. I haven't watched it yet. But have you guys talked about the Little Mermaid live action already?
Not a great link. Part of your Broadway world was supposed to. I can't remember why that it didn't get scrapped, but it got put on the back burner. I think it's because they ended up being able to have a guest kind of last minute, so they decided to do a different topic. But I wish they would have, because actually the thumbnail's killer. The thumbnail was
No.
really cool. So yeah, not yet, but I imagine it will be done at some point.
Okay, so I don't know if you'll be able to confirm this or not then. So the whole thing I was going to go with on this was, so everybody's pushing the woke agenda, as they call it, of, the LGBTQ community stuff, it's whatever, it's fine. But I guess now they try to change the kiss scene, between Ariel and Prince Eric.
Yeah, I can't confirm or deny that because I haven't watched it yet. But yeah, I heard rumblings about that.
Yeah, I'd heard about that, and I also heard that the whole Sleeping Beauty thing, even like, where or was it Sleeping Beauty? Snow White, sorry, Snow White. I heard that
But
they're changing that too. I think how like he wakes her up.
yeah, okay. But I guess here's my 2 cents about that. So if you watch the original Little Mermaid, um, she's into it. It's pretty obvious. Now, when it comes to Snow White, I mean, the curse says what it says. So why are we getting bent out of shape? I'm gonna put it out there. If I'm in a coma, and the only way for me to wake up is for my true love to kiss me, you have my consent. Go
Right.
for it. Like you can't
Well,
ask.
and that's the thing too. It's not like saying the curse can be lifted only if a random dude who, on a scale of 1 to 10 is like at least a 9, wakes me up, can kiss me. It's not. It's the true love part. So
Yeah, they
I was
glossed over
like,
that.
that's yeah. They just kind of were like, yeah, But that's my 2 cents on it too. But regardless, but that's what I mean about things changing and how things evolve. I mean, even R.L. Stein, going back to Goosebumps, didn't realize, as his books were reprinted, I think he just found out maybe like a year or two ago, that they were changing parts of his books to be more PC,
In
and
Goosebumps,
in Goosebumps, and he didn't even know that, like, they were doing that. He wasn't told or nothing.
what is it now? The were person of
So
Fever Swamp?
it's, well, it's they go into some examples, I think, of wording, like fat. You can't call somebody fat. I'm like, I'm sorry, but if you're fat, you're fat. I'm fat. Okay. Like my cousin's little daughter, who I love to death, will come up to me and it's like, "You got a big belly." I'm like, "I sure do, kid." What am I gonna say? No, I don't. The hell I don't. Mirrors tell me different. The little girl's telling me different. Clearly, I've got a big belly. Okay, it's fine. So,
I think the bulk of the world's problems can be solved by just asking a kid.
all I'm saying. and pun intended or not, that was still a good way to use bulk. So, yeah, it's really not a big deal to me. I get where some people can get offended by it, but if it offends you, then do something about it. That's what I just don't understand. Go to the gym, exercise, get healthy, eating right, things like that. I
That
like
or
pizza too. I like pizza too damn much, bro. Okay, back watching those Pizza Hut commercials back in the '90s. I'm sorry, but I I, I had to have pizza.
man, if you
Every time
played,
I saw
if you, I don't
Ninja
eat pizza.
Turtles, always had a pizza.
Yeah, two things about pizza. Firstly, I don't eat pizza that often. Not that I don't like it, but I know it's terrible for me, so I try to avoid it. But if you played for me a stuffed crust Pizza Hut pizza from the 90s right now, I would order from Pizza Hut immediately. And I know that. And then secondly, about Ninja Turtles, um, it's it's hard to remember, or it's hard to believe that in the 90s this was relatively new, where they started putting not previews for other movies but actual commercials at the beginning of VHS home releases. And Ninja Turtles 2 had that Pizza Hut commercial about the kid in the outfield. I can
That,
remember
so
every
that
part of that
one
song.
that one was actually the first Ninja Turtles movie, I believe.
No, it was the second one. I had it on VHS.
See, I had all three. I don't know if I still have them on VHS, but I had them, and I thought for sure that
You know
third
what?
one
You're right. You're
is the
absolutely
fourth
right.
one.
It is the first one. Nope, you're 100% right. I don't know why I was fucked up, but yeah.
There is one I think on the second one, but I can't remember what it is now. I don't think it's a pizza one though.
Oh god, I can't remember either. Well, they did enough pizza advertising in the opening credits for that movie. So
Right. Well, that's the thing. Like as I'm watching Ninja Turtles, whether it's cartoon or the live action, anytime they got a pizza, I wanted a pizza because I wanted my cheese to do what theirs did. That pull, just keep going.
that's why
I've never
stuffed
had pizza
crust.
to this day do any of that. So, it's like watching cartoon pizza back in the '90s. Like I saw a meme the other day about it. It's like, of all the things he's like in life, I just want my pizza to be like this. And it was like Goofy movie where he's pulling the cheese pizza out of the box.
Oh god. Speaking
Ninja
of,
Turtles when they did it, it's like, dang, dude.
I mean, speaking of the '90s, it was the late '90s, but still the '90s. A Goofy movie, man. That it had no business being as good as it was, and it was. Was it a theatrical release? I can't remember. I think it was.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, but
Because
it wasn't.
I remember seeing it in theaters.
I think I do too. But gosh, that's going back a little ways. But oh, actually, yeah, it was, because I remember being confused as to why Goofy and Max looked different than they did in Goof Troop.
Oh yeah, different artists, different art
But
styles.
I prefer a Goofy movie
Yeah.
nowadays. But
Oh, 100%. I absolutely love a Goofy movie, and I actually got to introduce my daughter to that maybe like 3 or 4 months ago.
oh, that's
I was like,
awesome.
I've never shown you this movie? She's like, no. I'm like, okay, click. We're watching it.
They say, hey,
So
just so you're aware, we're still waiting for that album to come out.
I'm telling you, like, I still talk to people to this day. Like, I post on my Instagram, if and it ever pops up anything to do with Goofy movie and Powerline, because I absolutely love both, and I'm still waiting for that damn album. And I tell people that too. I'm like, if he drops that album tomorrow, I'm buying it.
It would
Like,
sell so much. But yeah, that's one of the many things from the '90s that does still hold up. And speaking of Disney, did you watch Gargoyles when you were younger?
oh hell yeah, I've got the seasons
Oh, dude,
uh,
still holds up.
in my library. I mean, amazing.
I
Absolutely love Gargoyles.
it's incredibly impressive when you look at, notwithstanding, because Batman the animated series still holds up too. I don't mean it to
Oh
sound like
god, yeah.
all animation sucked, but I mean Gargoyles is a show that should, in all fairness, should never have been made based on where Disney was at the time. But somehow Greg Weisman pulled the hat trick and got it made, and got it made the way he wanted to make it, except for the third season. But I actually like the third season. I know a lot of purists don't consider it canon, but I actually liked, not as much as the first season, but I still like the third season, the Goliath Chronicles. But yeah, I'm rewatching that too, and it still holds up. There's some animation goofs here and there, but that's animation. That's
Right. I
it
mean,
just happens.
it's gonna vary. Dragon Ball had that too, which is another lovely '90s show as well. But
Yeah, the funny thing about Dragon Ball, I don't know if you've I'm sure you've seen DBZ abridged, but
Oh yeah, not
Part
all of it, but I've seen a majority.
Yeah, well, the funny part about it that is they fix a lot of animation mistakes when they're making their episodes, so it's fun to watch.
They
What's
do
up,
a little
Sosa?
cleanup.
Let's all agree that Colby disappointed all of the USA last night. I didn't watch the fight, dude. Sorry. But yeah, Sosa's showing. Sosa's into a bunch of '90s stuff too. You can check out his YouTube channel, Sosa Potence 300. Does a lot of pop culture analysis, and he did a review recently that I still want to watch. I haven't gotten a chance to yet, but you can check his stuff out as well. But yeah, Gargoyles. They keep talking about a Gargoyles movie being in the works, and I hope not. I kind of want them to leave it alone.
I think it'd be amazing if they could do it right because of technology today and the story writing. You still have Keith David, who's alive, who voiced Goliath. You still have Jonathan Frakes, who voiced Xanatos. He's still alive.
I think.
Um, and I think I'm gonna butcher her name, so I'm not even. She played. She also voiced, Elisa Maza, but she was played Deanna Troy in Star Trek: Next Generation.
Oh no, that actually isn't who voiced Elisa. She voiced Demona
I
Marina
thought she did.
Sirtis.
Oh, that's
No,
right. No, you're right. I think she did voice. She voiced Demona. That's right. I'm sorry.
yeah.
I got that
Basi-
mixed up.
Basically, the entire cast of Next Generation, with the exception of Patrick Stewart, did a voice in Gargoyle. Actually, I think that might be
Right.
true of the main cast. Huh.
It could be because I feel like, well, maybe not Brent Spiner. I'd have to look into that.
I think
But
he did, as a matter of fact.
I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah, we'd have to fact check that. But yeah, John,
Yeah, because I thought Michael Dorn did a voice,
he
but
did.
I can't remember who at this point. I'd have to look to see who they all played. But
Yeah.
like all of them are still alive. They can still voice these characters, and that's the great part about it. I mean, so whether it's live action movie or like even if they did a live action series, I think that would be pretty cool too. Series seem to have a better chance at doing things like this. So that's why I was excited for a Goosebumps series originally with Disney Plus. Needless to say, the majority of us do not care for that. But that's our very first episode of our podcast. So you can go check that out. I won't go into detail here.
Yeah.
That'd take too long. That'd take too long. But other things like they've done for other shows, I've actually enjoyed.
Yeah, it's kind of hit or miss. I will say though, what disappoints me, which I haven't watched the new series yet, but based on what the vibe I got from you guys is the concept was pretty good, but the execution was flawed.
Yeah, the execution and it's like they try to trick you into thinking just leading up to the show that they knew about Goosebumps and they know like they read the books and things, and then you watch it and you see the designs of the monsters and stuff, and you're like, you don't know a damn thing about Goosebumps, do you? It's like I think they did they got the Tim Jacobus Cliff Notes. They were told the title of the book and were given 3 sentences to use for their episodes, and they just butchered everything about it to us.
And then they just pulled a Pander versus Kathleen Kennedy. Put a chick in it, make her gay.
That's exactly how it went, which is funny to me because and I think Disney at this point is reeling on that decision to try to do that, like the wokeness crowd. They've lost so much money trying to push that agenda, and they should have just stuck with the recipe that made them successful. Everything from the past, from Goofy movie, to Little Mermaid, to Beauty and the Beast, to whatever, you know what I mean? Like all these things are classics for a reason.
Yeah, and
they're perfect for a reason.
Yeah, and this is
you can't create something new, just not with those stories and characters.
Right, and it's not like Disney is a company of innovators. Like we just said, Gargoyles. It was completely out of left field for them, but it was super popular, and that's not even getting into their. That was all done during the Eisner years when they were really wanting to focus on TV, and you had gems there. You had Goof Troop, Darkwing Duck, Aladdin the animated series. Gargoyles is in there. there's so many more that I'm just blanking on right now, but these were all just hit shows and they were new and different. So you're absolutely right. They can absolutely make new stuff, leave the classics alone, but for some reason they just I think it's because I think it's because they either got rid of or retired out anyone there who was legitimately creative because Jeremy Boring of the Daily Wire was on the PBD podcast recently and he said something that really kind of took the wind out of my sails when it came for rooting for Disney. He said, "Here's what nobody understands is even if they decided today we're going to scrap all the BS projects, we're going to take the hit and we're just going to make good stuff like we used to back in the day." He said they can't because they don't have anybody there who actually knows how to do good storytelling. They got rid of them all.
Right. And that's the concern I have nowadays with a lot of different movies, and because a lot of stuff you see, even in the Scream movies, they joke about it, requels and reboots, and it's like that's all we get nowadays. Like because nobody can find that original idea. Like, and it's hard. Don't get me wrong. When you've had so many years of movies, stories, I mean, some of the stuff's going to get recycled. It's hard to find something new that you know is just going to draw people in. It can happen. It can be lightning in a bottle, but it's tough. And I don't think they just want to make money, so they're just like, "Oh, this was successful. Let's do this again." But we'll change a few things. Obviously, let's fix this. Change this up. You're gay. You're
You're a chick.
You're a chick now instead of a dude, and blah blah blah. I mean, okay, well now you've changed it. Now it's not what it
Not
was before, but it's also now you've just trashed it. Like it's not new. You just trashed it.
yeah, but now it's not even the thing anymore.
Right.
Because like they learned that with Scooby Doo. Like how many Scooby Doo cartoons did we have from the original to where we are today? But I remember they did. I think the latest one was the Mystery Incorporated one, which well technically the latest one, which Mystery Incorporated has some fans, but okay, I'll use the Max Velma.
Well, I was about to say I think maybe Velma was
Yeah,
the
that's
most
the
one of the
but
most recent.
but here's the thing that blew up in their faces so bad they're actually like even in the marketing they're like it's not Scooby Doo, it's Scooby Doo. You
Well, you're
guys,
using characters from that universe, so
yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
his name's Norbert, not Shaggy. I'm like,
yeah,
it's like, look, it's that series. I can confidently say, as someone who watched, I think I watched the first 4 episodes just to see. It was pure morbid curiosity, and every time I was just like, ugh,
yeah.
why why are we doing this? Why it's when did I want to know when this started, when studios legitimately started giving projects to people who obviously hated the source material and just want to shit all over it.
Yeah. No,
Because it's
I'm 100% agree on that. Like
yeah,
I just don't get it.
because it's obvious that the writers for Velma either couldn't care less about Scooby-Doo or they hated it. It's pretty obvious, and it seems like you said, the vibe I'm getting from the Goosebumps, the new Goosebumps series, is that the writers just didn't even know anything about Goosebumps. Like they couldn't even take the time. They're young adult fiction. They're not that long. You can crack open a few. Like you can read one in a couple hours
Right.
tops. You know, and if you're a writer for a
It's
living, I assume you can read. So I
yeah,
hope
you
you
think
can
you'd
read.
be able to at least knock out 2, 3 a day, you know, because let's say even if it takes you a little more than 2 hours, your work day for a typical person is 8 hours. So 2, 3 a day, you should be good. Get your notes done, figure that stuff out. But even the people now that who are making all these reboots and requels and stuff, most of them are based on old TV shows. Like when they try to redo Masters of the Universe, I think it was on Netflix. Not terrible, but and it had Mark Hamill, I think, doing a voice and things like that. But that doesn't necessarily save it just because you have star power in it. Animation was fine, but I only watched a couple episodes. I was like, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
there is a real fine line. Fortunately, we do have some gems that come out, like Cobra Kai, for example, which isn't a
yeah,
reboot, it's a continuation. But I always point this out. Cobra Kai was made by people that love the Karate Kid, and it shows.
yeah, and that's where even Star Wars and has with Disney now. Like all the stuff that Dave Filoni's doing. Like you can tell him and Jon Favreau love Star Wars. They know the material. Now Obi-Wan and Boba Fett, their shows, okay, they were all right. Not great as far as fan review goes, but they had their moments. Especially Obi-Wan. Once Hayden Christensen showed up as Vader, and that storyline kind of progressed. And then you got to see that really cool fight scene and all this other stuff. It's got its moments. But then you get to the Ahsoka series. I personally really loved that, to be honest.
Oh, really? You did?
Yeah, I actually really like that. Like I like especially again near the end where they really tie in her young days as a Jedi Padawan, and like they know the material with Clone Wars. So it just depends on who's doing it, but then you get to the masterpiece that is the Mandalorian. Okay, so that show in itself, taking a brand new character in the universe that's already established, and it's not a hard thing to do at that point. You can play off of things that are already there with a new character. I don't know why they can't figure that out and kind of trek that with other things. Like you want to make a new show, okay, great. Or if you want to take, say they take gargoyles, okay. As much as I love to see Goliath and all that, that's what people know. Bring him in later. You can make something new, a new character first in that universe.
It's
Start it
possible.
out.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean, there
absolutely.
you can take the same formula. I mean, you may not have the success Mandalorian did because it's Star Wars. Star Wars has just got an endless universe of characters and stories, from books to games to movies, now shows. Gargoyles doesn't have any of that, mind you. It just really have the show. But I'm just using it as an example.
I mean,
You can
they do have the comic series that they could pull from theoretically. I know a lot of fans would love to see that. In fact, a lot of fans consider the continuing series of comic books canon and not the third season of the show, because that's when Greg Weisman departed and he was writing the comics, and then Disney did their own thing for a season. But I'd be remiss to discuss the 90s, particularly with you, if we didn't bring up trading card games,
Oh yeah,
specifically Magic the Gathering.
Pokemon and Magic, and I mean Pokemon was '90s too. So I mean
Yeah.
like that was something that was
Oh, you know
still going
what?
strong till
That
today.
that was the second Power Rangers wave. That was the other
So
product that just overnight, just still to this day, which Power
yeah,
Rangers, not to the same degree, but Power Rangers is still a thing.
it is. Now that Netflix and Nickelodeon, or maybe it's just Netflix, has it, but they're not using Sentai footage anymore.
Yeah,
So
you
this will
and
now be the first actual show that's purely American of Power Rangers. That's coming with Cosmic Fury. So there's that. Pokemon, another one, blew up so big in the '90s.
oh gosh, it
Still going
was.
strong today. Like the fact that I could own a house and some other shit, just some if I would have kept my cards,
Oh,
because I
don't
had
get
the
me
original
started.
base set back in the day. Like I even found in my attic the other day the base set booster box. Like there, of course, there's no packs in it because I opened them back in the day. But I mean, like, I'm like, God, you know what? I was like, I could own a house right now, or whatever. I wouldn't have to do jack diddly at this point. I could just sell Pokemon cards,
Right.
or I could just be one of those Pokemon YouTubers that have like a bajillion followers and they can afford to buy these expensive boxes and do openings and giveaways and stuff. But
Hey, man, one day, one of these days.
man, the the thought of that would be incredible. But regardless, we get to that point where you see '90s, so much good stuff come out of it, so much like very expensive stuff nowadays came out of it. Even Street Shark toys are so expensive.
Oh God,
Like
yeah, but and a lot of people younger people may not realize it, but the 90s was essentially anything, just about anything animated was like, oh, we're making this to sell the toys. Because I remember seeing the Street Sharks toys before the show ever made airwaves.
Yeah. Did you realize that that was Vin Diesel doing like promotion stuff for Street Sharks?
No.
Yeah, look it up on a commercial. I was like, holy crap! Like, it was either a commercial or was that like some con or some kind of event that they were doing
That
to
is
promote Street
hilarious.
Sharks.
You know what though?
Um,
I just gotta share. I still to this day tell your Magic the Gathering Heart of the Cards story.
which
Because
never fucking worked.
oh my god, I have to tell it for you guys. It was seriously one of the funniest things I've ever experienced in my life. So you're in the middle of a game and you're playing one of our friends who is
Dominant.
so good, but you're very close to winning. So this is a big deal. And you're literally saying the whole time, like, if I could just get this one card, I will win. And it comes to a point where basically, if you don't draw this card, you will lose the game. So you do this picture, man. You put your hand on the deck and you go, heart of the card, and you draw the card, and you hold it out so you can't see it, and then you bring it to your face, look at it, and you go, fuck you, heart of the cards.
Yeah, that didn't work for me. I do remember that, and to this day, it still hurts my soul.
Oh, it was
Uh,
so funny, though.
that was the day that told me that animes were lies. Uh, that and the fact that I can't turn Super Saiyan tells me animes are lies. So
Yeah, that's some bullshit.
I know I got the Widow's Peak. I was always called Vegeta, but
I mean, here's the thing. You all tried it. You all tried it. Just to see.
oh, everybody had to have tried
Yeah.
at least once.
Everybody
Nowadays
when
we got special effects and stuff, so now I could turn Super Saiyan on YouTube, but
yeah, but it's not the same. And then I know, and when they aired that episode of the Boo Saga where Gohan told Videl how to control her energy, we all fucking tried it.
yeah, Gohan's a fucking liar too.
Yeah, fucker.
But yeah, no Heart of the Cards for me. Magic the Gathering was a big thing back then for me, but obviously that's still going strong too. I mean,
Yeah, I'm just it's escaped me, but I always thought $1 million idea would be an anthology series of Magic the Gathering. I think that'd be
yeah.
cool as hell.
Well, there was for a while there was talks about doing a Magic the Gathering show or movie.
I think for Magic, it would almost have to be a show, and it would have to be well, it wouldn't have to be an anthology series, but as anybody who has ever played knows that every set has its own story and lore and different characters and all that. So I think that would be a killer show.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% behind that because I mean there were some really great stories that each set had. And they had expansions to those. Like so you'd have, the first set of starting a new story and then maybe two or three sets after that to complete the story with new cards and characters and everything that all tied in. So it was a good idea, it's a good concept, and they're still going strong today. And I think that's what's made Magic one of the most successful, if not the most successful card game to ever exist. But at the same time, the artists they get for these cards, I mean, some of these cards are just gorgeous.
I mean, they're
Uh,
works of art. There's no
yeah,
denying
I
it.
mean, like some of those I would love to have just as like prints up on my wall. Actually, a lot I would like to have as on my wall. But and that's what drew me to Goosebumps too. Before the show started was the book covers. It was
Yeah,
Tim's art.
which by the way,
So
you can purchase assorted prints of the cover art at Tim Jacobus's website.
yeah, jacobusstudios.com. It's actually a really good deal for a print. I think they're 18 by 18, and a portion of it actually goes to helping feed the hungry in Tim's neighborhood in New Jersey. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and they're very affordable. I was kind of surprised for the prints. Obviously, original artwork's more, but the prints are not bad. They're worth every penny. And like Nick said, it goes to portions of it go to feed the hungry in his neighborhood. So it's like, oh great, he's a nice guy too.
Oh yeah, he's a great guy. I was
Yeah.
actually lucky enough to get to meet him in person before this podcast, like a couple years ago, when he came to Indiana Comic Con. So I only went there to meet him. So I made sure I was like the first person in his line, waited for him to get there. I got to have a great, probably 30, 40-minute conversation with him before people really started rolling up to his table to
Oh,
get
that
stuff
must have been
signed.
super cool.
So, oh yeah, it was awesome. Tim's always been like an idol to me. Just from an artist standpoint, because from when I was younger, like art was what I always wanted to do, and I'm a good artist, but never really pursued it after that because in art, that's when art transitioned to digital art at the time, and I was more of a like classic, using paints and pencils and things like that, like to draw and paint things like that. So digital felt was kind of out of my league at the time because technology back when we were younger and going to the 90s and early 2000s really hadn't hit that point yet.
No,
Um,
right in the middle of the
so
transition, hardcore.
right, so we were kind of stuck, right in the middle, and we kind of got effed. We were born either too soon or too late into the generations that are out now. So, but that's one of the things, like I said, that really brought me that. So it was really great to talk to him about all that. And when we had him on the podcast, it was great to talk to him there too. Um, but I really appreciate companies like Trick or Treat Studios for putting out stuff um, from the 80s, 90s, 2000s on of horror, from movies, TV shows. I mean, they obviously do Goosebumps line. They have masks and props and stuff like that, but they're doing action figures, Goosebumps figures from the Tim Jacobus covers. So it's like, okay, yeah, I'm definitely getting those.
It's like, yeah, take my money,
Yeah, no, Trick or Treat shows gets a lot of my money. I should be just an investor at this point.
They
So,
should just do a sponsorship spot with you.
well, you know what? I would absolutely love to do that if it ever got down to it. I mean, I really just did a video recently with, I don't know if you ever saw The Black Phone.
I didn't see it, but I've
With
heard of it.
Ethan Hawke. Good movie. But I did buy the mask from that. Now they are losing the license after this year, so I wanted to make sure I got the mask before they completely sold out again because they did sell out once, but they thankfully brought a pre-order back before the end of this year, so I just recently got that. But anyways, I mean it's really one of those things that like yeah, it's if it wasn't for companies because they brought out Toxic Avengers 2 figures just recently, but in like original packaging, and even brought out figures that weren't released originally, like characters that were released now that they weren't originally. So there's a lot of people that they're starting to expand out into that, and my hope is, maybe they get other licenses, because if they're doing Toxic Avengers, I feel like the sky's the limit at that point. Because I mean, granted, there's a good following for Toxic Avengers.
Yeah, but there's other properties that yeah I would wager say even have a bigger following. So yeah, that's
Right.
really cool and exciting to be sure.
So it's one of those things like you see these companies that can bring stuff from the 90s back in the right way, not in the way where we're seeing what we have been seeing of just trying to make a buck off of something that was popular back in the day. Like if they wanted to bring out the original Dino Rider toys again and the original packaging and stuff like that, oh man, I'd be all over that in a heartbeat. Like I don't know if you even watched Dino Riders. That was an 80s, early 90s show.
I'm familiar with it, but I don't think if I did it doesn't stick in the memory.
So at the time, they were motorized dinosaurs that you could buy.
Now I remember.
Yeah. So I mean, like that was awesome back in the day. I mean, you don't really get a whole lot of that nowadays. Plus, they had like cool weaponry you could put all over the dinosaurs, and had the little character figures that rode the dinosaurs that had all this really cool like space age technology on these dinosaurs for war. I mean, that's an awesome idea, by the way. So
Holy
it's like,
shit! Do you remember War Planets?
yes,
That TV show, I cannot find that show anywhere, but oh my god, you want to talk about I am convinced Avatar: The Last Airbender ripped off the concept.
oh, I would agree with that. Yeah,
I
because I
mean,
mean, we had things like that, Battle Toads. You
yeah.
had, oh god, like so a lot of the things like if you go in the same vein of Goosebumps, what spanned out from that? Are You Afraid of the Dark? I don't know if you remember that or not. That
Oh
was a
yeah.
super popular show. I love it. And if I'm being completely honest right now, and you're hearing it here first, their episodes were scarier than Goosebumps. I said it. I
Well,
said it.
it's a
Said
known
it.
fact that R.L. Stein is a funnier guy, and there's Goosebumps kind of gets a reputation of being a horror series, but there's some humor in there.
That's by design. And
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
that's actually Stein's background. Like I found out, like he at that panel I was at with him and getting to talk with him. He's actually his background before he jumped into horror was comedy, but his comedy stuff, while he is a funny guy, like literally he is a funny guy, dude. He had me belly laughing quite a bit. He did at the time when he was doing all this, it didn't really sell. So he was approached and said they wanted him to do like a children's horror, which was pretty dark in the beginning. If you ever read Welcome to Dead House, it's pretty dark. Um, but as you go on, you kind of see where he lightens up a little bit. And it's not really until series 2000 where they say you can get a little darker. Tim's covers can be a little more creepy, and because they wanted that new vibe, that new rebranding of Goosebumps, if you will, jumping out of that original 62. So anyway, there's a transition point here where it's like, Are You Afraid of the Dark came out. I do feel their episodes are way creepier in a sense than Goosebumps. While I like the Goosebumps like vibe more, uh, the look that Are You Afraid of the Dark had and their opening credits, their song, like everything was pretty creepy, and I love it. And then you had Erie, Indiana. Like I don't know if you remember that or not.
I didn't until right now, but
Yeah,
yes, we did.
little hidden gem that actually had. Did you ever watch Hocus Pocus?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So Omri Katz, who played Max in that movie, was I think considered the lead for Erie, Indiana. Not a lot of people remember that for some reason, but Erie, Indiana, it's great. Like I loved it. I mean, so it spurred and spawned these other kids horror shows, if you will, to drop. You know, even uh, I consider some things like maybe Gargoyles and like the darker tone kind of stuff seemed to be catching a lot of kids back in the day. Even Batman the Animated Series had obviously it was a very darker version of Batman than we
Compared
hadn't
to
seen
what we had,
since
yeah.
at least in the cartoon world we haven't seen anything like that with Batman. But if you watch Batman the Animated Series now compared to like a lot of these other shows that try to come out after with Batman, it's still the best. Like Kevin
It
Conroy,
yeah, it really
his,
is.
his portrayal is amazing. Mark Hamill as the Joker,
Just killing
phenomenal.
it. I'll never
Harley
forget the
Quinn
first
is
time.
Harley Quinn. I mean,
Yeah.
Harley Quinn was born out of the animated series. So, but man, like the stories themselves were so good, so in depth. It made you feel, and
In
that's a
20
kid show.
minutes.
Yeah, and that's a kid show done in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Incredible writing. I mean, it's a masterpiece of a show. Um, I could go on and on. I could do a whole damn podcast about
Oh yeah,
Batman.
we absolutely could. Yeah. And I mean the DCAU, um I mean that whole thing, a shared universe before it was cool.
Yeah, because you did have the Superman animated series that came out in the 90s.
And then they reference
Um,
other heroes. The Flash appears in a few Superman
yeah,
episodes. Green Lantern's seen and mentioned. Batman and Superman team up on more than one occasion. And then
yep.
you get to Justice League, which again, shared universe before it was cool.
So good. Like then you get Justice League Unlimited, which came
Which,
out shortly. Then you had Batman Beyond.
oh God, Batman Beyond, hidden
Oh.
gem. Well,
And
not
let me
hidden
tell you, I
gem,
could do a
but
whole podcast too just about the opening theme songs to these shows because damn, like these people they had composing these and doing these, man, they had no business slapping as hard as they did back in the 90s.
and
The
and now and
X-Men
now they
animated one, Batman the animated series, Batman Beyond, like god dang, dude, like I could just go on.
even Superman's was good. Like it doesn't hold a candle to Batman, but I mean it's still
No, but they
good.
tried to do like the John Williams mixture in there, I think.
Yep.
Keeping it a little more, and it makes sense, trying to keep it a little more lighthearted and light
Sure.
toned compared to Batman's because man, Superman should be.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. But
So
yeah,
it makes
theme opening themes, man, those have kind of disappeared too. At least in the United States, Japan still does them, but
that was one of the things we actually really talked about in that episode. We talked about the Goosebumps series was the disappointment with the opening theme. I can't even call it a theme song because it's really not.
it's more like
It's
a
just a few
bumper.
music. It's yeah. It's just a few musical keys playing. A little bit of a creepy tone in a way, and that's it. But when you think about the '90s show, every video anybody makes has Jack Lynn's music on it.
Yep.
And if I showed you a picture of that dog with the yellow eyes,
Instantly know what it's
if
from.
you ever watched that show, I damn sure know you just thought in your mind, don't give me no shit.
You caught me.
I know everybody has thought about that dog and that sound just from that scene alone. So they were memorable. They were very good, and I don't know, man. Like it's everybody's dropped it nowadays. Every show I watch, like there's no really amazing music to the intros.
No, and a lot of them aren't even doing opening themes anymore, and it's so weird because I'm guessing they're doing it to save money, but it's there. A lot of those opening themes became iconic,
Yeah,
and it's
I
like
mean,
I'm sure you
I could
more
sit
than made
here
your
and give
money back.
you like 50 different examples of amazing openings to shows, like the music. Um, Justice League even had kind of a banger. Justice League Unlimited did, and it's like all these shows had such banger songs, man.
Static Shock.
Up a deep, deep, up a deep, deep. So yeah, I mean, even Stack Shock, you have a memorable one. I mean,
Yeah,
even going just like to regular TV shows, like I mean, how many people can sit
I
there
mean
and do
Full
like the Fresh
House.
Prince of Bel Air? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, Fresh Prince, Full House,
Fresh
Family
Prince.
Matters,
Yeah. Even
all
going
those
away from
shows.
cartoons, they all had amazing and memorable
I mean the
openings.
Animaniacs.
Yeah. I can recite that right now too.
Oh yeah, we all
Now,
know that.
granted, I can't do the Istanbul song or the States song that Wacko did.
I can't do the whole state song. And anybody who has the country song memorized, have sex, please.
Because I mean, even my boss the other day posted in the comments, he was like, um, he made a joke about because we were talking about how this because I am in the appraisal business, so like the whole thing was about this appraiser who thought this city's name was this city's name, but of course that led into him saying something to the effect of why they changed it I can't say, and I was like, yeah, I
Oh,
was like, I know where you're going with this. I was
the
like,
whole
I
it.
watch Animaniacs.
So
That's where I
Istanbul was
first heard it.
Constantinople.
Exactly, that's where I first heard it. So I mean, it's just when you think about like things like that, it's like poof, memory unlocked, and it's awesome. I'll never get that from any show nowadays, though.
No,
Lists of
nothing.
opening songs or anything like I get nothing.
Nope, nothing new. It's just oh, and God, the Power Rangers theme.
Oh yeah, that slaps hard too. I mean, like just throwing out electric guitar and just keep rocking it. I was like, God damn,
Dude,
all right,
it's in my workout playlist.
yeah,
I mean,
you
it's
know,
there. So is the Batman Beyond theme.
yeah, that should be too because that's phenomenal. Like again, trying to go futuristic techno beat. I really don't know what they were going for, but it worked.
Oh, hardcore techno, and then I love the fact that all the shots they have of like the action figures. Dude had literal dolls on a Lazy Susan in his kitchen, and they just they I don't know what you would call that. They just used lighting effects and colored it, and they came up with that. That was all shot in like a couple of hours, and they turned that into that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like amazing stuff that just created from nothing. And that's what gets me is like sometimes it's you hear these stories about writers and whether it's television writers, songwriters, or whatever, they just hear one thing, write it down on a napkin or a note page or something, and next thing you know, you've got a freaking masterpiece within hours, or you know, short as even a month sometimes. Like
Yeah,
it's amazing,
you've
and
at least
it's
got the concept.
yeah, and it's stuff that you might have heard 1,000 times, but just because that guy heard something a little differently than you, now he's changed it into something that is iconic and will never be forgotten.
Yeah. Well, gosh, we didn't even get into '90s movies, so I guess I'm going to leave the audience wanting more. Let us know in the comments if you want to do another '90s nostalgia episode with Shawhain. We'll do one again, I'm sure, on one of the podcasts. But for now, we're gonna wrap things up. You want to plug your stuff one more time, and then we'll let these fine people get on to their boring lives.
I don't want to go back to my boring life, but it's fine. So we do have a Goosebumps podcast if you're into Goosebumps. That's really all we talk about. We talk about everything from the books, the two movies that came out. We're talking about the future of Goosebumps as well, not just the past. We're trying to figure out, what kind of things we would like to see going forward if they did a reboot, or what we would have liked to have seen with this, that, and the other. So we have a lot of stuff coming up too. A few guests that we'll announce at some point once we know for sure when they're going to be on. But I don't want to give that away just yet. So I'll keep that in the dark. But I will say, we just had Tim Jacobus on. Absolutely loved him. Such a good guy. Definitely check that out. And you can follow us on the Goosebumps channel on YouTube. That's where our podcast drops. And, hopefully we can do a little cross promotion with you guys here pretty soon, since now we've joined the Arete Media family.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I'm plugging all your guys' stuff. Not just because you're in the network, but I mean it's a genuinely good podcast. So I think everybody should check it out. Like I said before, link in the description. Also be sure to check out Part of Your Broadway World. Link is also in the description. And we will see you guys next month for a new episode of the Arete podcast. But until then,
Happy holidays, folks.
There you go. I don't know why we're Al Borlining. It's just
I don't know, Jake.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, all that good stuff. We'll see you guys. We'll see you next year.
Oh, ouch, man.
Ugh.